So welcome all of you all over the world. People have joined. So welcome to the Values for Life series, episode 79 on Reverence. And we are very fortunate indeed to have with us Sister Denise again. She has been with us for almost 4-5 topics now in the past. And thank you so much for being. And what I like about Sister Denise is that she's always an ever-ready soul. She always says yes, never says no. So I think all of you know very well about her, but I'll give a background introduction about her because there are many new souls as well who join all the time. So she has joined the Brahma Kumaris in 1974 at the age of 23. And between 1975 and 2000, that's a big chunk of 25 years of her spiritual life, she has been instrumental in coordinating various centers in Germany, Canada, and USA. And that's what actually in the background, we were speaking about how she and Sister Chandru had a beautiful journey of adventure, and they were instrumental in opening various centers in Canada and USA. Many of you also don't know that she has featured on more than 100 television programs on Raj Yoga and another further 100 TV programs on addiction recovery. She speaks very fluently French because she's French national that way by origin. And also many people don't know her, that she speaks Hindi as well. And if I can tell you that from 2001 to 2007, she was at the international headquarters in Mount Abu, where she has written 10 textbooks of the various diploma programs in education and values and spirituality. And she has served as the national coordinator for Brahma Kumaris in Canada for almost 3 to 4 years, from 2007 to 20. And right now, as we speak, I think since, if I'm not mistaken, since the onset of COVID, she has been in France for almost since 2019 and 20. And she's serving that part of the world there. And we have a lot of reverence for her, for all the seniors who really give a lot of time for these talks. So a big thank you for that, gratitude for that. And as always, the poem for her and the reverence value, which we are covering today. So today we have with us Sister Denise's gracious presence, who shall indeed highlight on the importance of reverence. In today's day and age, revering others makes great sense because disrespect and disregard make us feel like nonsense. Surrounded by the clouds of darkness, which are indeed so dense, all of us are living life for survival as if on the fence. Humanity suffers as people mock at each other's expense, knowing not that bad karma won't come to their relief and defense at the end. So let's remove from our life now this false pretense, because for each other, there's a lot more to dispense. Finally, God comes and reveals himself, removing all the suspense, which thereby brings happiness in life, which is truly immense. So with this few lines, I would now request Sister Claudia to please go ahead with the official inauguration and welcoming of class.
Om Shanti. Good morning from our side. We are right at the beginning of the morning, and it's an honor to have you with us. I always have so much respect, so much. I think you have teaching us for so many years, so much. You brought us so many points that because you like to go deep into the points. And I always like to see the points at the class that you give. And I like to see all the deep points that you bring. So I have lots of respect for you. I think reverence is about respect. I have a deep, deep respect for you. And because of that, I like to offer you some flowers because they say the reverence is together with the white flower and also with the rose that means our love for you. So thank you very much for being with us. I'm really looking forward to hear from you today. And then let's see what you are going to teach us more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And this, before I give it to you, Sister Denise, a few housekeeping announcements that you can please click on the interpretation icon. We have quite a few participants. It has crossed more than 100 again this time. And the first 50-55 minutes would be the talk. And if you have any questions, you can please feel free to send them to me in the personal chat box where the speaker isn't disturbed. If you send it to everyone, that becomes disturbing in between. So with all these instructions, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, this word reverence is a very interesting one. And so I have some of my good BK friends here staying at the house this next few days. And so we were talking about it, and we went into the dictionary and the thesaurus, and we had a look at how this word reverence is defined and how it gets used. And as you know, language changes and develops. And the English language is the main language in many different countries and cultures. Where English has been spoken for centuries, maybe not many centuries, but at least 2 or 3. And languages develop separately in different places, which means that the word reverence is also experienced and used and expressed differently in different parts of the world. So we were also taking a look at that. And so here I'm in France, which of course the French language is there, and the word reverence is used very, very rarely in France. In England, reverence would be a word that you would apply to God, perhaps to nature. Sometimes you use the word reverence for something that is much, much, much higher than a regular human being. And so it's much, much higher than respect. We can respect another human being, but if we revere another human being, then that would be a very rare one, someone who would be like the highest of the high among people, high from the point of view of their impact in the world, from the point of view of their character, from the point of view that everyone feels that they are somewhere in between yourself and God, but much, much higher than a regular person. And then in other parts of the world, reverence is a word that you would use for someone that you have a lot of respect for and that you consider very worthy and valuable person. Sometimes this would be a person who is much older, so they have this very long life experience and they have done a lot of very good work in the world, maybe social work or political work or literary work, and they would be considered one of the greats, someone who is the best in the world in their field. You would use the word reverence for a person like that. And so it's an interesting word, especially because of the various or the variations that we have in different parts of the world for this. And I think it also is very connected with local cultures, because there are vast differences between the cultures of the world. And when I say local culture, I'm talking about cultures which vary in small geographical variations. Like, for example, India is a place which has many states, and historically those states were perhaps even kingdoms in ancient times. And so there are different cultures which arise within one subcontinent. You see the same thing in the United States. It's also 50 states, and there's a very, very big difference in people's mentality in the East Coast, the West Coast, the central part, the northern part, the southern part. A lot of variations, and that includes variation of language and variation of the use of words within the language. So thinking about this word reverence makes my mind spin off into a lot of these other areas of consideration. And when we're thinking about virtues, we're thinking about values, we're also thinking about the idea of a united humanity. At the moment, humanity is very divided, and a lot of people are using the word polarized at the moment because the divisions between people cause them to go very, very far in opposing directions from each other. We have two very prominent wars going on that are well documented in the media and which are creating a lot of polarization in different people's minds and a lot of emotional engagement in having to face and not being able to do anything about a problem which is very impactful, because there's a lot of violence that goes on in war. And when you see scenes of it anytime you want, you're involved, you're engaged. And some of these wars are wars between cultures, between nations, between religions, between civilizations. And nations, civilizations, and peoples are to be revered. But when we see the war situation, the engagement using violence, then what people do in those situations is they start to remember God. And they also start to question, where is God? How can God allow this? Because on the one hand, most people do believe in God, and most people are pretty religious. And then with that religious feeling, there are assumptions about God, what God has to do, what God should do. And when things happen that are not according to what they revere God for, then it creates a lot of confusion. And one of the beliefs that people have is that God will protect us. And those who believe in God and who do many different religious activities, they feel that they will be protected. But yet, places of worship, which are themselves revered, are getting destroyed. People are dying in them. And so this creates confusion in the mind of people who have reverence for the sacred, reverence for God, reverence for the ideals that God stands for. And in cases where people are doing acts of violence in the name of God, then that creates, again, another layer of confusion. And so I think that what we're facing at the moment is a very confused set of populations in the world who really don't understand how it's possible for things to reach these degrees of unbearableness. And they say, it should not be like this. How is it possible to be like this? Whatever they believe in is being so challenged that it brings us into question about what is the value of revering God and revering the greatness of different nations when the behavior goes against that. And so I'd like us to take a look at this confusing situation and what can be done, or what should be done, or how should we think about the things that we hold sacred in our minds and hearts. Because we need to find a way of thinking, a way of positioning ourselves mentally, intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, in regard to whatever we consider sacred, so that when terrible things happen in front of us, or that we know about, or to people we know, that we don't find ourselves turning against what we hold sacred. Because that's the danger. You say, my belief is that God should keep everything in peace and harmony, and nothing is in peace and harmony. Therefore, it must be God's fault, and therefore I will go against God. You know, there are people who process their ideas in this way. And of course, I would call that faulty logic, because the beliefs that people have are based upon a certain logic which holds together as long as circumstances hold together. But when circumstances start going in a different way, then the logic also doesn't work anymore. So therefore, I think about these things. What is the logic that I would use, or that those who are close to me in study of spiritual matters, what would they use to maintain their reverence for the sacredness of God and what he stands for and what he speaks about and what he teaches? Because all of us are students and practitioners of Raj Yoga. And Raj Yoga is a spiritual practice. And the focus of attention of a Raj Yogi is the being of God. And the aim is to become a godly kind of person more and more and more. And that is reflected in our values and our virtues, and how we deal with the circumstances that we encounter, with the idea that we have enough information and enough capacity to manage every challenge that comes in front of us. And what we are experiencing is that, okay, maybe we have been favored because we've studied a lot of things about this, but we encounter so many people around us who use a different logic, have different beliefs, and these beliefs cause them to doubt the adequacy of God, or even the existence of God, because they use logic like, if God would be there, then this could not happen. But it's faulty logic. And what we learn in Raj Yoga, which is very interesting, is that, you know, the presence of God is most potent and most tangible at the time when humanity is in the direst need. And then he says, these catastrophic circumstances that you are hearing about, seeing on the media, and experiencing directly or indirectly, these are because of other things. This is not something that is caused by God or allowed by God. And so that these things cannot be used in your thinking processes as a reason to reduce your reverence for God. What is causing these things? Two things. On the one hand, we consider that the philosophy of karma speaks to us to a certain extent, that when there is negative karma which escalates, then it produces a great deal of suffering. And sometimes people say, but it seems to be getting so extreme that looking at it in terms of the laws of karma doesn't seem to be adequate. And they're right, because it's not only the question of karma. And when people ask me, people who are right in the middle of war zones and will communicate with me and ask me, what's going on? And you can hear on the phone call, you can hear bombs exploding around them. And they are relatively safe, but only relatively safe. And they say, how do we process our ideas about God, and how do we remain in close contact with God with all of this going on around us? Because we are afraid. We could die any minute. And I would say to them, you're right. And what we need to do here is bring in the concept of destiny. And destiny is a very difficult concept for people to work with. But in Raj Yoga, we have been told many things about it. Predestination, destiny, certain things which have to happen that is not anybody's fault. And so there is nobody to blame. It is certainly not the will of God. Many people have been asking me, what is the will of God? Is this the will of God? Because there are many religious beliefs which say that whatever happens is the will of God. Can this be the will of God? How do we think about God? Can we revere God if this is God's will? You see, so whenever you have this if-then sentences where people are using the principle of logic to come to an understanding and to arrive at a conclusion, we have to look at what are the definitions, what is actually the function of God, and what is really the will of God. And so it's not possible to revere someone who wills people to be killed in very catastrophic ways and in vast numbers. It is not possible to revere someone who wills that. That's not possible. It's not logical. And so we have to say, this is not the will of God. What is the will of God? And one of the wonderful things and why we would revere God so much is because the will of God is that his children, all souls are his children become so empowered and so capable and competent and so spiritually empowered that they are able to navigate very serious circumstances and reach the other side intact, spiritually, psychologically, if not physically. And so then we have a very different logic, because our logic cannot go against who we revere. We revere God. And so we cannot say, this is the will of God, especially when God says, no, why do you love me? There is a very deep spiritual law which says that when people are in dire circumstances, the one thing they do is turn their attention to God. Why? Because God is their protector. God is the one that they can turn to even in the moment of death. You leave your body in the remembrance of God, or you see other people facing very dire circumstances, life-threatening circumstances, and you are connected with God and bringing them peace and inspiring them to remember God, then their spirit comes close to God and is protected. Because the spiritual knowledge that is given by God teaches us to understand the difference between body and spirit. And when people don't know the difference, they say, I will die, they are dying, these people should die because they are making us die. But no, he says, that's not a reality, that's an appearance of reality, because the soul is indestructible, it cannot die. You cannot kill a soul, you can destroy a body. But that soul will immediately reincarnate. And so this exchange of negativity in warring people is something that can only happen when people are spiritually blind. So I think one of the important things that we can do as those who will revere God, because we understand and we know more than other people know probably, is to enable them to maintain their faith and their reverence and their love for God, because it is only the love of God and the energy of God and the wisdom of God that is going to enable us and others to pass through these circumstances. We're not just only dealing with war, we're also dealing with a lot of disruptions in nature. And so people are thinking a lot about climate change, and the COP event has been going on. And so many people are concerned because the majority of people in power, the people who have economic and political power, which has an effect on how we treat nature, well, nature is also to be revered. And many people are saying that, well, this is climate-induced catastrophes, and human beings are responsible because they have disregarded the value of nature. They do not revere nature. If you revere nature, then you will not abuse it, misuse it, exploit it, and expect it to be always good to you. It's transactional in a sense that if you take care of nature, nature will take care of you. You have love for God, God will love you. You have love for each other will love you. You take care of yourself, and God will take care of you. So these are powerful principles, but perhaps it is materialism, perhaps it is greed, perhaps it is who knows what the real reason is, but people have lost reverence for nature and reverence for God and reverence for the rights of other people. And of course, the earth is very stressed, people are very stressed. Living is, for most people, just survival. And so your attention is on that, and you will say, well, I can't afford to, it's a luxury to revere God and revere nature, but it's not really. It's fundamental. And so we look at ourselves. I mean, not everybody is in dire conditions. I myself am not in dire conditions. I have nice place to live. I have my health. I have adequate wealth. I have good friends. I have everything that one would need for a good life. And I maintain my reverence for God, my reverence for nature, and my reverence for humanity. And this is a principle by which I live. And I think that, sometimes we hear talk about leadership. What is leadership? And I think leadership is you do something and everybody follows that. And it is said in our spiritual practice that be careful, because whatever you do, others will look at it and they will do the same thing. And I think that's a very interesting principle, because if we see all around us, people are not having reverence for God and they're not having reverence for nature, and they're in big trouble. So I think it's too much to complain and say, well, they should be revering God and they should be revering nature, and then they wouldn't be in trouble. That's not realistic to ask them to do that. So I think, okay, these are intangible things, reverence for God, reverence for nature, but you yourself are a visible, tangible person. And if you maintain your reverence for God, your love for God, your value for God, and your recognition of how much help God is giving to humanity in general, to yourself in particular, and you express that. It might even be that you don't necessarily speak about it, but you reflect that in how you live. This is a very powerful message that has the possibility of reconnecting people to their reverence for God, to their reverence for nature, to their reverence for those things that are really important in the long term, and higher principles. And why are we living anyway? We live for some purpose. It has to be a higher purpose. And what gives us higher purpose is, I think, the wisdom that we experience and that we learn from God and from others who are closely connected with God, who are leaders, spiritual leaders, who are individuals who reflect these qualities. And they are people who inspire us. And then we are also asked to inspire others in our own way. And I think that this is a powerful energy, which I think is maybe not always so tangible, but it becomes more and more tangible. I think when people are very confused and very panic-stricken really about what's going on, they look for a light, or they look for a lighthouse. Like if there's a storm in the sea, the sailors will look for a lighthouse to find out where to go and find direction. So sometimes it is said to us in our studies, you should become a lighthouse. And then we have to think, okay, what is that? What does a lighthouse do? And what is the symbolic value of a lighthouse? Anyway, the form of God is light, so there's that. A lighthouse is what saves you. A lighthouse is what preserves you. A lighthouse is what gives you direction. And so I think part of practicing the idea or value or virtue of remembrance is to keep in mind what you revere and what you consider the highest, and connect yourself, hold tight to that connection, because then you will not be tossed around in the winds of the craziness of the world. You will have an anchor, and you will also be able to serve because you're not tossed around because of your anchor. And then others can perhaps anchor to what you're anchored to, or anchor to you, so that through you they're anchored to what you're anchored to. And they would feel that protection. And I think this feeling of what you get from what you revere makes that reverence real. And this is a reason why you would revere. Because reverence is like an energy that you give and that you feel towards what you revere. And if you really believe and trust and feel that God is going to get you through all of these disturbances, this trust, this faith is going to augment your feeling of reverence, and you will feel safe because of your faith. And your faith makes you very strong, and it can even carry you across. Faith is a very powerful thing. And so that is an important ingredient in reverence. Just a second. So let's take a look at reverence in the sense that's a little bit more down to earth. Reverence that we have for individual human beings who we know in our life, who we consider very elevated, very great. And I know certainly in my life, there are a few great yogis that I would say, yeah, I revere them because I hold these people as my models. Because I've seen them, I've watched them, I've lived with them. These are what we call in Brahma Kumaris some of the dadis. Dadis means the elders, the people who were great yogis, who studied almost their whole lives, and who demonstrated how to live under all kinds of different circumstances, who demonstrated what leadership is, who demonstrated what is the meaning of caring, whose values were real and corresponded to how they lived, how they interacted with people, people whose integrity was intact, you see, because in the end, we human beings, we judge each other. And sometimes we have very high standards. We hold each other to very high standards. And if we find out someone is dishonest, or someone is cruel, or someone is, exploiting or taking advantage or cheating or something like this, then we reduce our respect for that person quite considerably. We may be externally polite and correct, but internally we say to ourselves, yeah, I will show you external respect, but in my heart I will not, because you have betrayed my vision of you, in the sense that if someone is in a leadership position, if someone is considered by everyone to be the example of what a human being should be, and then they don't do that, that's a kind of betrayal. And there are many who will do that, because to actually live at that level and to maintain those standards for your whole life, that is greatness. And when you see human greatness firsthand, as I have, then you say, these are people to be revered. They're not many, but they're there. I think a lot of people in this world never meet anyone like that. But if you do meet someone like that, there is an indelible mark on your heart and soul made by those people who prove to you that to live a life as a man or woman of integrity all the way from the beginning to the end, and to handle different challenges, different obstacles, different exams and tests that everyone has in life, but to handle it with integrity, to maintain their quality, their values. This has a huge impact. And this also contributes to giving you faith in humanity. So even if you have all sorts of people who betray you, or who do not come up to the standard that they may have claimed that is their standard, you will not be so concerned about it, because there are people in this world who do and who are, and you recognize that this is not an easy thing. So you don't expect everyone to be at a high level, because you understand how extraordinary it is and what a high and rare achievement it is. So there are people like this who will be revered. And you know, one interesting thing that I think of quite often is that in the mythology and scriptures and stories that you hear about in India, India is a place where there are many stories of people of greatness. And you get stories about the gods and goddesses. In fact, in many cultures, you have gods and goddesses who are all somehow connected with each other. But the people who get classified as gods and goddesses, even though in some stories they show gods and goddesses being not very high-level people, but that's some. But otherwise, there are deities who are described as absolutely impeccable. And I think that this description is, I think, very specifically limited to Lakshmi and Narayan. There is no kind of defamation of these two deities at all. And I remember one of our great yogis, Dadi Janki, used to talk about this. There are all sorts of things said in criticism of the behavior of Krishna, of Ram and Sita, various different deities, but of Lakshmi and Narayan, there's nothing like that. And that's interesting. And these are individuals who are worshipped, and their images are worshipped in temples. And they are actually the perfect example of what kind of beings you could revere if you're going to revere a human being, because they are flawless. And I think that humanity aspires to and wishes to encounter someone who is flawless, for an individual to desire to be flawless is a very high goal, because we know that everybody has some flaws, you know. But if you have flaws, and you know you have flaws, and still you aspire to be flawless, there are people who really make that a main goal, a focus of their life, and they want to iron out all their flaws and really become flawless people. They use their whole life like that. Whenever they encounter any flaws of character that they may have, they really sit with it and try to work it through and work it out so that that flaw is neutralized, and then they can pursue their lives without that flaw. And that requires tremendous personal honesty, and I think personal courage to admit your flaws and overcome them and pursue the goal of becoming flawless. And so even if a person doesn't achieve it totally, but if that has been their goal, then a person like this will also be revered because they're sincere, because this is their aim. This is why they are alive. They're not using their life in a frivolous way. They're using it for a very, very high purpose. And even if they fail, because of their honesty and deep desire to reach that flawless stage, they will be recognized, they will be honored, they will be revered. So these are people. Then let's look at nature in terms of reverence. When people see great, spectacular examples of nature, this also induces the feeling of reverence. I am a person who has great love for nature, so whenever possible, I will go and spend time with high mountains, powerful volcanoes, great rivers, oceans, great acts of nature that are way beyond something that a human being could do, which inspires awe, you see, and this is a kind of reverence. So recently I was close to a couple of volcanoes that were erupting, not so dangerously, but you could really feel the possibility that these eruptions could come and become something life-threatening. And I think it's a kind of reverence that humanity can feel when seeing the huge power in nature. They put themselves in comparison with the power of nature in a humble position. You know, there's many situations in which human beings feel that they can conquer nature. And science has allowed us to develop that quite a lot. But at the same time, when you're in front of a huge tsunami or a massive volcano or a huge earthquake, you become very strongly aware that you are absolutely powerless in front of that. And so you need to respect the power of nature and revere nature because, you know, they say the earth is the mother and the Mother Earth will sustain you and take care of you and provide for you your food, your clothing, your shelter, your water, everything. And people have disregarded this and thought it was endless and they don't have to take care of the earth. And eventually a time comes when the earth will show you that you can't do that, and that the earth is very powerful and, in a sense, puts you in your place, that you are there because of the gifts from the earth, and you need to revere them. You need to value them and recognize them, because otherwise you're dead and your whole race is dead. So be careful. And I think that this is another aspect of reverence that's quite important and that makes a huge difference for us individually, in a sense, because of our karma. If you do honor and revere the earth, your karma will reflect that respect and regard that you have, and you will not damage, exploit, mindlessly destroy the aspects of the earth, because it will cost you. And to revere the power of nature and recognize its beauty and have a certain amount of wonder, and you go beyond the earth to the moon, to the sun, to the stars, to the whole universe, and take some time to be aware of how extraordinary this all is, and see yourself in that context. It will take down any arrogance that you may have. So I think that how and why reverence can be considered as a virtue and a value is because it has this capability of taking us away from false pride. And false pride is a very dangerous thing for humanity to be caught up in, because it causes us to not be able to understand things properly. It causes us to not be able to understand who we are and what we are. We think we are greater than something that we are not greater than. And it makes us abusive and selfish and all the things that a human being should avoid. So I think it's a very useful, very valuable characteristic that is worth nurturing, worth thinking about and meditating upon to increase and intensify. So I think I will stop there and turn it back to Dr. Manoj. Thank you so much, and Om Shanti.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for really describing reverence in so much of detail. As you spoke about reverence for God first, the Supreme Being, then you came on to the reverence for nature. Beautifully explained that, because my questions were relating to that. You have answered all of them actually. And also reverence for people and objects, because there is a question in the chat box about should we be having reverence for objects and for people as well? And is it really objective to be having reverence? Like, does our reverence change depending on the status of the person, depending upon his educational qualifications, so on and so forth? That was one question.
I don't think status and educational qualification indicates whether or not a person has greatness. You can have people without status and without educational qualification, but they have these other qualities, spiritual greatness, integrity, that I would say is much more worthy of reverence than just something so tangible as an educational qualification or money or power. People desire those things because many people are impressed by it. But in the end, it's not the same as a person with spiritual integrity and purity. It's not that level.
Speaking of reverence for human life, someone is asking about euthanasia, which is mercy killing. So should we be advocating that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think as an organization we need to advocate or not advocate that, because there are many, many different circumstances involved. And there are different people who have different beliefs around that. And so I would not wish to take a position on it. This would be something that you really have to look at. I mean, in a hospital, a doctor will speak to the relatives of a patient who is, say, brain dead or in a coma, or they are not likely to recover from their situation. And this happened to me with my sister-in-law. She had a very life-threatening illness, a very rapid onset multiple sclerosis. And she was in hospital, and all that she could do was move her eyes. Everything else had stopped. And the hospital said, now, what do you want us to do? We can give her full life support, and she can expect to live for a month. We can give her partial life support and expect to live for maybe 2 weeks. And we can do nothing, and maybe she will live for a week. What do you want? And we all said, in terms of not having any tubes and things, in terms of what we felt would honor her the best, we said, do nothing. And we will just be here, do nothing. And we will be here as long as she is here. And I still feel that that was a correct choice. And other people may say, no, you should keep the person alive as long as possible. But then we have to look at quality of life and all these things. So different people have different beliefs about that, you see.
So there are a few practical questions about new BK students who have joined. You mentioned about Lakshmi Narayan, the deities. So the question is that I am a Christian, practicing Christian. My faith is Christian. Someone has said that. And I have recently started liking the Raj Yoga meditation, but I'm not able to identify with the deities that, because we are taught here to have an aim to become Lakshmi and Narayan. So can you please help me? Why not some Christian deities kept in front to help me to relate? That's what they're asking.
Well, of course, that will be much more relevant for you. And as a Christian, you have two figures that are very high quality individuals. One is the Christ, and one is the Virgin Mary. And there are others, saints and different people, but these two, I think the descriptions that we have of them correspond in a lot of ways to the qualities of Lakshmi and Narayan. And so you can think about, identifying yourself. You see, as a Christian, it is said, follow Christ. So follow what he did. There are many things that are there in the Bible about how he handled different situations, what kind of person he was, how close he was to God, all these things. So you do have that. And then if you want to go further into Raj Yoga, to understand about the kind of people that existed in the world of paradise. Christianity speaks about the Garden of Eden, the world of paradise, but there's very little information, just that it was there, and that a time came when Adam and Eve were thrown out of paradise. But if you look at the iconography in Christianity, you see that paradise is an earthly place, which is beautiful, streets paved with gold, golden palaces, angels. And so there are many things about the Christian description of paradise and the description of the golden age that correspond with each other. And so it's possible for you to make bridges from a Christian background to a greater understanding of what is meant by the world of Lakshmi and Narayan. And you can do that.
Wonderful. So I'm sure they're convinced with this answer. Another question related to climate change. It's happening as we speak, the COP28. So it's, I think, the 28th year or something like that. So they're saying that, is it really of any help to just have meetings and conferences? Because there's no such solid solution how to combat climate change crisis. Is there any spiritual endeavor which we can do? And how to reduce our spiritual, is there any spiritual way to reduce the carbon footprint? That's the question.
Well, I think carbon footprint reduction is just one bit of an attempt to control climate change. But you see, it really depends on whether you decide that for yourself that climate change is human-induced or not. And as far as we know, in terms of Raj Yoga, climate change is impacted by human behavior and the fact that we have a vast population and the fact that we use fossil fuels and we have all sorts of disposable stuff that's imperishable, plastics and so on. We have done a lot to damage the climate, but climate change is not only because of human activity. Climate change is also destined. Climate change happens from time to time in human history where there has not been any of these human-induced things like fossil fuels and plastic and so on. And so there's something you can do individually and governmentally to maybe make it slightly better, but to stop it from happening, I think that it is not possible because the earth is going through a huge change, which is from within, which is because there's a lot of imbalance going on. Like, for example, the tilt of the earth is more than 23 degrees. And 23 degrees is sustainable, but more than that is not. It's wobbling too much. And that's nothing to do with humanity. The magnetic pole is shifting. That's nothing to do with humanity. It's shifting because of itself. And so the stability of the earth is substantially destabilized, which is nothing to do with humanity. They didn't cause it and they can't do anything about it and they can't stop it. Things that are going on in the sun are out of range of human beings, but they are impacting climate change a great deal. The activity of meteors and sort of wobblings in the orbits of planets or other celestial bodies that are a bit random, they are affecting things. Degeneration of the quality of matter, which is something that people don't know much about, but which we learn about in our spiritual practice. When the quality of matter is degenerated, the energy of matter isn't holding the molecules together properly, then that is some people can say, well, it's because of human mentality, but you can't prove it or disprove it. But you can definitely say, and we take into consideration that the quality of the soul is degenerated, the quality of matter has degenerated, and it causes a situation where it has to sort of collapse and reconfigure itself. And we have a lot of indicators in the paleontological record that this has happened from time to time. And here we are in front of it. And from a physical point of view, you can do something, but you can't stop it, you can't control it, you can't make it go away. And so you have to face it, navigate it, get through it. And I think that we're being helped to do that in our spiritual study and practice.
Yes, so now speaking of reverence for the Holy Scriptures, there's a question which is mentioning, it's a subtle complaint that the Brahma Kumari philosophy or the students following that, they don't have reverence for Holy Scriptures. So do you want to explain
that? Well, who wrote the scriptures and when and why? In ancient times, this type of information was an oral tradition. And so people would speak about it, but it wasn't really written down. And the time when these things were written down was around, so it was roughly around 1,000 years in the past. A lot of people, they say, well, God wrote the scriptures. And from our studies, God says, no, I didn't write the scriptures, I spoke. And people heard, and that was a long, long time ago. And at that time, they didn't write the scriptures, but scriptures were written a long time after God spoke. And then if you look at the Holy Scriptures in detail and you analyze them, then you see that there are a lot of contradictions within them. Most of the Holy Scriptures are called eponymous. Eponymous means they were written by a number of different people, and over time they were altered, and there's a lot of record of this. So for people who are believers and who have unconditional reverence for the scriptures because they think that they came directly from God, and if they did, then of course everybody would revere them, but there's not that much evidence that they came directly from God, neither in Hinduism, nor in Christianity, nor in Islam, nor in Judaism, nor in any of them. They are all people had written down what was known. And there's an interesting example concerning the Jain scriptures, which I heard about. I don't know if I have it absolutely correctly, but what I heard was that when Mahavir Jain left the body, and when all of the people who were his immediate devotees or followers also left the body, then there was a time when the people said, okay, what do we do? Because we've forgotten what the information is. And so it divided into some people who said, well, let's write down what we remember. And others who said, no, it's gone. We shouldn't write down anything. And so there was this split between them. And I believe that this made a difference between the Digambar and the Svetambar. I may be wrong, but this is what I heard. But it's an example of something that happens in religions as they move from being the beginning into traditions, you see. And I'm much more familiar with probably Christianity than the other religions because I grew up in that. And so, for example, the Bible, there's many different translations of it. And it was actually the Christians decided what Christianity is going to be in 800 years after Christ. And this was decided by a group of bishops. And then there were other people who didn't agree with them. And so Christianity split into a few different sections. And as time went by, it split more. And a lot of these splits are because of disagreements about whether something is true or not true. And so in Christianity, you have the Roman Catholicism, which decided that, well, the Pope, whatever he says, is infallible. And it must be right. And then there are some Catholics who say, well, he's infallible. And other Catholics who say, well, he's just a man like the rest of us, so he could be fallible. And this is what happens as religions progress through time. And so what the Brahma Kumaris are doing is trying to understand what spirituality is. And there's also this huge body of information that we are working with, which is given by incorporeal God through Brahma Baba. And then some people will say, yes, this is correct. Other people will say, we don't understand how this could be correct. But anyway, those of us who study it, we say, as far as we can tell, this is correct. Because if you don't think it's correct, why would you study it? So I'm one of these people who think it's correct. And one of the things that he says is that you have to think about God, and you have to think about the possibility that God is communicating with you, and God is very, very subtle. He is called incorporeal. And it's very few people in this world who are able to be subtle enough to connect with God. That means they have to be mystics. And there are a few mystics in this world who do make contact and who do have deep understanding. But the majority of religious people are not mystics. They're believers. And one of the problems in the world today is you get a lot of conflict between religions. And this is a very dangerous situation, because in the name of God, if you look at the history of religious war that has happened in the last 1,000 or 2,000 years, people maintain a particular position vis-a-vis others who have a different position, and they are ready to go to war over it. And that is something where a lot of suffering happens. So it's not really that Brahma Kumaris don't revere the holy scriptures, but Brahma Kumaris are trying to understand a few things and figure out what is spirituality and live according to that.
Okay, wonderful. Our time is actually up, but there are quite a few questions. So I'll just take a few more. In the next 5 minutes, we'll prolong it a bit. Yeah, the next interesting question is, what is the best way to show reverence to God? Is it prayer or meditation?
Well, I think it really depends on you individually. What is your relationship with God? Do you love God? Do you honor God? It's a very private and personal thing. And if you want to meditate, if you want to pray, if that reflects your reverence of God, then that's what you should do.
Okay, so each to his own. Thank you. That's wonderful. The next question is about a very practical one, that nowadays the youngsters, even below 40 or above 40, the children, the younger generation, they don't have reverence for God. That's fine, but they don't even have reverence for seniors at home. So is this because of a generation gap? what is the reason they don't have respect and reverence for seniors?
Well, you get that every generation. You always get that for years and years and years, generation after generation, because young people are trying to find themselves and they need to exercise their freedom. And you get young people who have great reverence for God and great reverence for their parents and their elders, and you get others who don't. And some of it is because of their experience in life. There are many, many different reasons, but it's very difficult to generalize like that because I don't think it's really true.
Okay. And you spoke about 2 wars. I mean, because that's happening and we can see that outside in the world. The person is saying that we don't blame God. You also spoke about karmic philosophy, so he's fine with that. He's saying that whatever happens, happens for good or for the best. That's what is written in the scriptures, and he reversed that. So what is good in the wars now? We know God is not doing it. We know it's karmic philosophy. But what is good? Everyone is suffering so much.
Well, when you say good or not good, one thing is you can look at it on a case-by-case basis, and another is you can look at it from really zooming out and looking at the state of the world. So in the teachings that we study in Brahma Kumaris, it is said that we are passing through a time where there is extreme circumstances because everything is breaking up. Civilization is breaking up. The stability of the earth itself is breaking up. And these wars are part of it. And it's considered good from the angle that something new, a reconstructed world, is in process of happening. And a reconstructed world cannot be built on top of an existing world that has many problems. But just like the analogy that is given in our teachings is that every so often in a village, the ancestral home reaches a point where it's no longer able to keep repairing it. And they decide, okay, we will raze it to the ground and we will build a new one. And so it's something like that. So from that angle, raising the old to the ground because something new is going to be built, which is for all of the immortal souls that we all are. And so if you look at it from that angle, then you will say it's okay. We wouldn't necessarily say it's good, but we'd say it's acceptable, it's inevitable, we understand, we have to navigate it. But if you look at it one by one, is human suffering good? That's not the way to look at it.
Sure. So we'll just take this as the last question. It's like a question that Baba, they're saying, I mean, God, Supreme Being, is the point of light. So how do we experience all the relationships with that point? It's very difficult for them.
Well, you don't have relationships with a point. God is not an object. God is a being. And for you to be able to interact with God in relationship, as you do interact with different people, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your teacher, your guru, your doctor, you have these relationships with people because you benefit from that relationship and you sustain that relationship. And this is God saying, okay, you understand relationship because you know yourself in terms of relationships. And if you look at India, people don't think of themselves as individuals, but they think of, I am the son of someone, the father of someone, the friend of someone, the doctor of someone, the patient of someone. They see each other in terms of relationships. And he's saying, well, you understand this. So now I'm going to help you to understand me, that I am teaching you, so I'm your teacher. I am loving you, so I'm your mother. I'm giving you identity and an inheritance, so I'm your father. I'm helping you to prepare yourself for death, so I'm your guru. Because of all the ways in which I interact with you, you can understand me in terms of relationship. Now, if you go to other cultures who don't understand themselves exclusively in terms of relationship, but who think of themselves as individuals, then they will relate to that idea of having all relationships a little bit differently. But you have to understand that God talks to his students, bearing in mind where they are, and then slowly bringing them to where he is. And that's the sign of a good teacher. But if you take all these things like as literal or as facts or something like that, it's too gross, you can say. You need to bring it to a progressively more subtle level, because human beings are very physically minded, and God is totally non-physical, and he is creating bridges between the gross and the subtle, between people who are really physically minded to something utterly spiritual. And that's a big chasm to cross, but he creates bridges, and we must understand that that's what these are. They're bridges.
Fantastic. So we're already on the bridges, and thank you so much. A lot of reverence to you as well for answering all the questions patiently. So now I'd like to invite Dr. Ashok Mehta and Sister Claudia, the seniors here, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Doctor. Thank you.
Om Shanti. This man, I think you are excellent as usual. The depth of knowledge that you spoke on was amazing. The reverence that I learned in an early childhood was to respect your teachers, to respect your parents. And if I wrote to my father, we used to write as Param Puja, forever respectable, reverend parents. This is how we used to write. And I think we used to revere all our spiritual teachers, whether they were sadhus, sadhvis, that I was born in a Jain religion. So we respected those who followed the basic principles. But Baba says the same thing, that the truth, the non-violence, to possess very little, to have a celibacy, and not to steal. These 5 principles who followed, we respected and we revered them, literally. We used to go and touch their feet. I think that was a culture that in which I was brought up. And I also saw Mother Teresa, and we used to call her Reverend Mother Teresa, because she used to look after the poor and the abandoned children. And, she lived a very, very simple life, almost very close to poverty. So I think the concepts of reverence also depends on the society and culture in which you are born. The first time I went to America in 1970, and I went to a school with my niece and my nephew who were studying in Detroit at that point of time. And I was shocked that when they went to a class, somebody had legs up, somebody was drinking coffee, and here was a teacher who was teaching. The same experience I had in the hospital. We were 3 resident doctors. I was from India, there's one from Australia, and one was American. And all 3 of us were very well qualified. We had come there to, for final finishing touches to our head and neck surgery training. And I was trained to respect my teacher. So as soon as the chief came for a round in the morning, on the first week of my residency, I got up and walked around with him to see all his patients. And the other two guys never got up. And they said, it's not necessary. And the chief also said that you need not go with me. And I said, sir, I must come with you because I would like to learn from you. So I went all with him and, we saw the patients. At the end of it, he also felt that he must, show me something very specific. So he took me to each and every corner of the floor on which we were and showed me the northern side, what you saw in the city of Buffalo and what you saw on the southern side. And it was more of a, you give be a reverend kind of feeling towards someone. He also respects you. I think you get it back what you give. And I was, when I went back, so the two residents were not bothered. Yeah, they're just there, sitting there. And so I think it's again a culture that makes a lot of difference. Sometimes somebody might feel that to have a reverence is a mental slavery kind of, or inferiority. But I think that's the respect for which you must have for your teacher. So I think a cultural reverence, cultural way of responding to seniors or to the teachers differs in different parts of the world. As far as Baba is concerned, when I came first time, I came as a physician, as a surgeon to the Dadi, so I didn't have exposure to the knowledge. The first time I went to Mount Abu. But when you saw the things around, you have respect and regard. And then you automatically, because you see the simplicity of life, the way which they behave, the way they treat you with a lot of love and respect, I think that makes a difference. That brings a reference to your reverence. So our reverence or respect for the spiritual teachers, the people who practice this spirituality. Mm-hmm. And when you read Baba's Murlis, and especially Avyakta Murlis, we have seen right being in front of you. So we know that this is not a normal phenomenon of intellect, but this is coming through something unknown sources. With an unknown source, obviously we call it a God or a spiritual father. So I think a lot of things depends on your upbringing, your understanding, and finally, of course, your watching. If Dadi delivered more than 1,200 Murlis, Avyakta Murlis, and each Murli was so much of a depth, so your reverence for Dadi or who spoke to Dadi is something phenomenal. At the same time, we have a reverence for Mother Teresa because though she was Catholic, that we know that they were in India for a specific purpose, but still the work which required a reverence. I think, but I enjoyed every bit of what you said. And I think concepts of God have changed from times, the early times to the recorded times. God is, something is unknown which is running this universe and this planet. Thank you very much. Enjoyed every minute of your talk. And I'd like to hear you again and again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I really go with the points that Dr. Mehta talked about how is a reference that sometimes souls forget about those who had helped them, who was more seniors, and then also I think because they have, like you said, reference, to have reference, sometimes they don't because they have a false pride. They think they are better and this and that, so they don't revere the other one. They don't even see what they could learn from the other one. But it is a kind of a trust, like you said. We have trust and faith that God's going to help us all the time. And of course, we help them to help too. So it's kind of I always think it's a kind of a one hand goes, the other hand comes. So when we give, So we give reference to God. He is going to also be in our side also when we need. So when not only with God, but with everybody else. So we start doing like Dr. Mehta said, with our parents, when we have regard for our parents. And so we learn through the life to have regard for others too, because they know they have more ability to know more than I do. So for that, I should not have false pride, think I know everything. So it was very nice how you went through every little point and about every little thing, even including also nature too, because if we don't treat nature the way how we should treat, so nature is going to give back to us. So thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. I am sure that you put lots of thoughts in this today because it's not easy, but I really appreciate. I'm sure not me only, everybody appreciate you talking about this point today. Thank you for everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Om Shanti.
Shanti.
Thank you, all of you. And over to Sister Anu for the announcements and the photograph. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Vidar Manoj. Yeah, it was really a great reflection on the subtlest aspects of reverence. Thank you, Sister Denise, and also to you, Dr. Mehta and Saudia. We'll just quickly look through the coming up programs, and we continue our journey on reverence with our values workshop on reverence number 679 coming up next week, 16th of December. First hour will be the experiential exercises for reverence, on reverence, and we'll have Sister Rona taking us through another further insightful talk and meditation on reverence. She will be joining us from Manhattan, USA. So the timing is 6:15 a.m. for West Coast, US, Canada. That makes it 7:45 p.m. for India. So please note the time has changed. And the next episode for Values for Life series is episode 80 on Hope, Asha. And for that, we'll have our very senior dear Asha Didi from ORC, Om Shanti Retreat Center, India, Delhi. And it is on 9th of December, 6:45 a.m., same time as today's. Please note, and you can get more information about all the programs on our websites, vihasa.in and vancouver.brahmakumaris.ca, and all the videos.
Sorry, it was not 9 December. I'm sorry to interrupt. 9 December is today.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, it is today. So it is, sorry for the mistake.
2 weeks from now, yeah.
Got to change. So it would be on 23rd. After. Thank you. Yeah, we'll have the photograph if everybody can open their video, please, so that we can make this moment forever recorded. Okay, and can open their video. Thank you so much. Over to you, Brother.
Oh, yeah, so we'll go into the meditation mode, and if you can play some soft music in the background, Sister Anu. I think you'll be doing some meditation commentary, right? Just yeah.
Om Shanti. Turn for a moment within and consider the greatness that is there, the greatness of God, the invisible, the intangible, the benefactor, the beloved. The greatness of the natural world, its power, its bounty, that physically we depend on completely. The greatness of those people in our lives who show us the way forward, our mentors and examples, and those who care for us. The most revered of all is the Supreme Being himself, the Mother, the Father, the Eternal One, the one who knows all things, and who at the time of great need, great disturbance in the world, comes to teach us who we are, how to act, to create a world of great people. Consider even the wonder of your own existence, your own self, a beautiful soul who at the present time may be depleted, but when in contact with the Supreme Soul, you become the extraordinary creation, the perfect version of yourself. That is also to be revered. In deep silence, we remember the source, the one, the great giver of all things. Take in this peace, this power, and this love. Oh, sure.
So thank you so much once again, immensely for your. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.